Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Glenn, I'm part of the team here at Supercharge, and today you're going to be listening to myself, my colleagues and some panellists talking through the subject of how AI can be used to really power behaviour change projects across the public sector. We'll be talking for about an hour, so make sure you're comfortable, you've got a cup of tea to hand and probably a pen to take some notes, because there's going to be an awful lot of information coming at you. It's great to have you here as part of our webinar from Supercharge. Supercharge ourselves, we are a digital agency who work across the public and private sectors, delivering behaviour change products, services, strategies, and more. So if you'd like to know more, please do get in touch, because there's an awful lot for us to be talking about. And today, as I say, we're talking about AI and how it can be used to power those behaviour change projects. We're not going to be talking about theory. We're not going to be talking about, is this AI better than that AI? There's lots of content out there that can give you information on that. What we're going to be looking at are real world examples, things where people have, could, or should be using AI, especially in the public sector, to really power behaviour change, whether it's healthcare, crime and community safety, or more. But one thing I'd like to do is start off with a bit of information from you. So it's a little bit interactive. I'd really like you to go to Slido. You're going to see a link appear on your screens, and we're going to ask you a bit of a question. It's a very simple question, really. What's stopping you and your colleagues in your organisation from using AI to power behaviour change projects? There's going to be an awful lot in there. So please do share some thoughts, and we'll start seeing a word cloud appear on your screens. You can put more than one answer in, so please do make sure you've given us some information, and you'll start seeing them appear on your screen shortly. I'm expecting to see a few things that are common in these sorts of discussion, and we're already starting to see things like a real lack of technical expertise happening. We also traditionally hear things like fear, so that will be interesting to see if that's true of your organisations. As you can see, we've got some stuff around not even knowing what AI really is, let alone how it might be able to be used for behaviour change. Or a culture. Maybe that's a culture of fear, maybe it's a culture of just not trying new things. So it'll be interesting to explore that over the next hour. Keep putting those words up, but if any of these are getting some questions springing to mind, please do share them on Slido. It's going to remain open. Ask your questions and we'll be answering those at the end of the session. You can ask as many questions as you want, and even any ones that we don't answer today, we'll make sure we provide written answers, and who knows, maybe record a little more content later on down the line. One thing we also are going to do shortly is just share a bit of information about how we might be able to help you address some of these and really understand how AI might be able to be used through a free workshop which we're running as a competition, but more information on that's to come shortly. So the reason it's going to come shortly is because before that, you're going to hear from one of my colleagues, Matt. Matt is part of the team who's led the production of a white paper, really exploring this topic in more detail and going into a lot of research to find out what's going on, what's working, where the challenges are, and giving some advice and guidance on how this might be done. So I'm going to hand over to Matt so he can take you through some of the key findings.
All right, thanks very much, Glenn. It's always a pleasure to be presenting to our webinar guests. And I'm excited to be talking about what we've been looking at today. So it's a white paper and figuring out exactly what AI's role is in behavioral influence projects and trying to get a bit more specific with it too. So governments have historically pulled one of a few levers in order to affect change on people. They either use economic incentives to encourage a behavior, they use taxing to discourage a behavior, and maybe they outright ban something as well. But behavioral influence projects transformed how governments approach influence, and now much more is understood about how to affect behavioral change at scale. So can AI actually help with this? The answer, I think, is yes, and the use cases are starting to emerge. Its potential is quite exciting. We found a London borough that's using machine learning to identify struggling families and figure out how to help them, and a startup that's using predictive models to combat missed NHS appointments, and a city using computer vision to figure out how to prevent overcrowding in public spaces. There are three exciting trends that we found emerging here. Number one is detecting behavioral patterns. So anything like analyzing normal behaviors, detecting any deviations in those behaviors, and then presenting a user with the solution to those. Number two is planning tailored interventions. So using prediction models to inform a real-world strategy. And number three is personalized coaching. So using generative AI or maybe on-device data to deliver a supportive habit-building app. Now, you might have heard us talk about this before if you've joined the webinars previously, but it's a fantastic model, so I'm going to run through it again quickly today. It's called the FOG model, and it shows the three parts needed for any behavior change to happen. You've got ability, motivation, and triggers. When something's above this action line, someone will carry out a task. And if something's below it, the task won't happen. So for example, Sarah wants to start jogging. She's got the motivation. She sees her running shoes by the door, and that acts as a trigger. But she sprained her ankle, so her ability is blocked. Tom has a messy flat, and he needs to clean up. He sees the trigger, which is the mess, and he's got the ability to do it. But after a long working week, his motivation is low, and he really can't be bothered. And then Matt intends to call his mother weekly. His motivation is there, his ability is there, but without setting a reminder on his phone, there's no trigger, so he often forgets. So the FOG model is really your key to dissecting why people behave the way they do, and then trying to come up with a tactical response in how to handle it. So trend number one is detecting behavioral patterns. So AI can turn unstructured and structured data into usable, valuable insights. We know this. But the trend is using data streams to predict behavioral patterns and designing an intervention around them. Missed appointments cost the NHS £1.2 billion annually and lead to worse health outcomes for patients. UK health tech Deep Medical has developed an innovative AI solution that predicts the likelihood of someone missing an appointment by analyzing external factors. They analyze things like the weather, traffic, job commitments, and even childcare responsibilities. The AI then suggests a new appointment for that person that's been affected and backfills it with someone that can make it. By offering alternative appointment times, they are now increasing a patient's ability in order to attend that appointment. And they're making the trigger better here too. By making the trigger better, it's like if you've taken what the previous example was, which is a GP appointment text 24 hours before. So if I get that, I might have forgotten 24 hours later, and because I've had a busy day and it's been a bit intense. But Deep Medical works the other way around. So it'll say, hey, there are disruptions on the tube, you should leave early. And that's a much more context-driven trigger. A pilot in the Mid and South Essex NHS Foundation Trust showed that it led to a 30% reduction in missed appointments. And that could save, just that trust alone, £27 million a year. So the impact of this could be potentially huge. Moving on to trend number two, it's planning tailored interventions. So predictive models can be used to analyze and forecast, taking desk research to a whole new level to inform the real-world strategy. In 2002, we had Minority Report, and in it, there's this police crime division that arrests criminals prior to them even committing the crime. Now, we don't have precogs, but we do have forecasting and analytics. University of Chicago researchers developed an innovative AI solution that analyzes patterns in time and geographic locations using violent and property crime data. The AI solution achieved remarkable results, predicting crimes up to 1 week in advance and with a 90% accuracy. And now we know that police presence in an area generally deters the crime. So if police are popping up in these areas as they appear in the predictive model, then criminals will actually have their ability reduced. So the FOG model can work conversely too to deter a behavior. And the researchers actually found that the arrests in the wealthier areas increased and arrests in disadvantaged areas decreased. So that's kind of an interesting insight into human bias tackled by AI. And then trend number 3 was personalized coaching. Personalized coaching is a mixture of AI and on-device data, and it can create experiences that support behavior change in a very, very individual manner. So personalized coaches can present hidden data that was previously hidden or unknown about a user's behavior, and then guide them towards improving it. Glucose monitoring is crucial for diabetics, but it's got some benefits for the rest of us too. So it can help us identify blood sugar levels and uncover some hidden health issues. January AI developed an innovative AI health coaching system, and that combines short-term glucose monitor usage with machine learning algorithms. So users wear this device for 2 weeks, and they log food and activities, and they allow this AI to build up a digital twin of their metabolism. And then the digital model can then predict glucose responses to over 32 million foods up to 2 hours in advance. And that's even without ongoing device usage. So you don't even need to wear the device anymore. January's app makes diet tracking easier, so it's an ability improvement, but it also means there are now triggers. So there are triggers, and those triggers are more contextual. But it also might lead to a motivational spike as well, because by seeing someone's glucose levels, then you might be more likely to choose a healthier diet. And we know that's potentially true because it's exactly what happened with fitness trackers. Behavioral influence projects were once this novel concept, and now they're quite an indispensable tool when it comes to policymakers and how they make decisions. And AI, I think, is opening up unprecedented opportunities to deliver more targeted and more effective results than ever before. By fusing AI and behavioral science, we can delve deeper into understanding human behavior. The interventions that we design can be more specific and more tailored than ever before. And that can be tailored to communities, it can be tailored to individuals, and it can be tailored to individual use cases as well, like particularly, very accurately what the problem is you're trying to solve. There are a lot of reasons to be optimistic about this sometimes scary technology. And we're now entering an age where behavioral influence projects can become more impactful and more meaningful than ever before. So I'm very excited for today's session, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Matt. How did you feel putting that paper together? Were there any elements of your research which really surprised you?
Well, it's still in its infancy, so I think there's a lot of exciting stuff going on out there. But really, a lot of things are just getting started. I think behavioral influence as a whole is still a little bit underutilized by product teams. Marketing teams have it figured out, but product teams could use it more. And then with machine learning and generative AI coming along, we now have a new toolbox to play with. So I think the potential is really great. And actually, there's a case study, if I may, that's in the white paper from the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. And they have a platform they developed called OneView. And that's an example of that second trend. And it's using machine learning to identify struggling families and then figuring out how to follow up with a behaviorally informed phone call. So if you're in arrears with your council tax, they know that you're struggling and they phone you up with quite a helpful, like, hey, how are you doing? Is there anything we can help with? We've noticed this. It's much less aggressive, more empathetic, and just a better approach. So, using predictive models and machine learning in a real-world, low-tech solution like that is just, I think it's brilliant, and I'm excited for where it goes.
Nice. And if there was one bit of advice you could give to an organization who are thinking about doing this but weren't quite sure where to start, what would that be?
It's always start with the problem. So I beat on this drum quite a lot in my day-to-day life. Start with the problem, use the fog model to really understand the behavior, and then figure out if AI is in fact the right solution for that tool or for that change you're trying to make. I think we often get a little excited, and you need to be aware of false assumptions so you don't build some, leaning Tower of Pisa on top of a false assumption. So really getting down to the behavioral level and then building from there would be my advice.
And working out if AI is the actual tool that's needed.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of LLMs for particular use cases at the moment, and those are great, but in reality, I think we can go a lot further than that. And we're at the beginning of a small wave, I think. I'm really optimistic about that. And I'm not really always optimistic about every tech trend that appears. I'm usually leaning to the more pessimistic side. But with AI, particularly in behavioral influence, I'm very excited.
So theoretically, you could build an AI model to predict what two people sitting on a webinar would wear that would make sure they weren't clashing, but actually in reality, all you need to do is have a conversation instead.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe the whole thing is AI. We're actually AIs.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. And you'll be able to read the white paper yourself. We're going to be releasing it later this week. Everyone who's signed up to this webinar, you'll get a copy winging its way to you. And if you'd like to see this and you haven't dialed in live, then please do let us know and we'll send you a copy straight away. But it's not just a copy of the white paper that you'll be able to get hold of as a result of this webinar. We are indeed, as I said, looking to offer a small number of workshops with people like Matt and the rest of the team here at Supercharge to give you the chance, with totally free, to be looking at how AI might be able to be used in your organisation, especially when it comes to behaviour change projects. If you'd like to enter this competition, please do just scan that QR code either now or over the next week and just give us a bit of information about what you're looking to achieve. We'll be drawing some names out of a hat and awarding those workshop positions to a number of people who have applied over the next week. So do get in touch over the next few days and have a chance of winning one of those. For the meantime, I'd just like to say thanks to Matt, and we're going to take a quick 30-second break before we come back with our panelists. So please do top up your glasses of water, and I'll see you in 30 seconds' time. Welcome back. I hope you're all topped up and ready to listen to our panel of experts talking through some of the issues that we've talked about so far, and no doubt an awful lot more. I'm really pleased to be able to have them with us today, and I'm sure you're going to find what they're saying incredibly interesting. So interesting that you'll no doubt have questions of your own. As I say, log on to Slido, share those questions with us, and we'll get through as many as we can today. And any we don't get through, we'll be able to provide some information to you at a later date. So, for the moment, I'd just like to introduce our panel. We have Andrew Boxall, who's here today from Microsoft, Ollie Lovell from Public Digital, and Louise Naberka from Islington Council. So, first of all, thanks very much for coming along, everyone. And hopefully this week, with no train strikes, it becomes a lot easier to get here on time. Just wanted to ask, to start with, what were your initial reactions to what Matt was saying earlier and some of the challenges, risks and opportunities? Maybe Andrew, if I start with you.
Yeah, I think AI offers an incredible opportunity, and it's really, really exciting. We're seeing use cases just blow up, but to Matt's point, it's not the answer to every single question, and sometimes it might not be that people are aiming for it, and actually you need to look at the problem. Is there a way of solving it? But just look at Copilot. So Microsoft 365 Copilot, I've had it for just over a year now, and it's genuinely changed the way I work and live, to be frank. I've got an extra day of time back, which I've reinvested into other things, mainly training because I'm a geek. But it's been a complete game changer in the way people work. But yeah, it's a huge opportunity for people to do things differently.
Fabulous. We'll explore some of that shortly. But for the moment, Ollie, how about yourself?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Some amazing examples emerging. I think Matt may have understated it slightly when he said we're at the beginning of a wave. Somebody in a document recently used the phrase Cambrian explosion, and I noticed it in the word cloud as it was forming, the kind of uncertainty about where to start, but we are at the beginning of probably the second big wave, probably maybe the third or fourth, but of the kind of evolution of this, and a lot is going to change. I guess I'm somewhere in the middle in terms of that optimist pessimist thing, and my nervousness comes from overconfidence and certainty, and a bit of what you touched on, which is that this is going to solve everything, as opposed to some of the more systemic challenges that it's going to actually expose in how people adjust to ways of working and change their mindsets in order to make it a success. So yeah, it's a really interesting and nuanced, difficult thing, and I never thought I'd find myself doing a panel on it, but there we go.
Thanks. No, I thought it was fascinating. And for me, there were a few standout thoughts that came to mind. We can look at the potential of AI and certainly behavioural insights, but when we apply them within the public sector context, the answer is yes, sure, we can do that, right? And these are the tools that are going to deliver that result. But we have to ask ourselves, should we? And think about the ethics of what we're doing, and to make sure that we don't focus on tiny insignificant interventions, and really focus on the big picture. It'd be the same as any other project, right? Have clarity on the vision, understand where you want to get to, and use that powerful combination of artificial intelligence and BI to help you to reach your goals and to shape the conversation that we have with our residents and our citizens, and not to use it for something insignificant like automated nagging, which can be a bit of a temptation.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like one of the key things is to refocus on things that are important. Yeah. But one of the things that is important is arguably to get started. The journey that isn't started takes longest to finish. Now, in that poll at the start, there was an awful lot of words coming up, which clearly we were asking what stops people. And a lot of it was on trust, and I think there was some words in there around leadership as well. Maybe Ollie, what do you think about that leadership issue?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I should open with, I think, something that we've all talked about in the kind of lead up to this, is it's very easy to refer to the public sector like it's an amorphous entity that is kind of monoculture. It's not. I think, Andrew, you were saying that the range of adoption of what I would call kind of internet era ways of working is phenomenally varied, from areas that haven't evolved much beyond the memo and just using emails in that kind of memo format, to areas like yours where people are actually actively experimenting and treating that mindset. So that's the first thing to get out of the way, is the sheer diversity of what public sector actually represents, as well as those opportunities, because kind of getting through that's really key. Leadership in the public service has some particular challenges. It has challenges around kind of culture and expertise. It has challenges around how it's measured and what its kind of core values are. But actually, one of the big problems or kind of central pillars of this for me is around certainty. And there's a real desire, if you've ever had to work with the Green Book and you've had to work with big programs, if you're accountable for spending public money, there is a real instinct for certainty. And there's a comfort blanket around forming certainty, which is actually has been blocking for years progress on more experimental, more iterative things. Unless we can get out of that mindset, that's really risky. There's a little bit of nervousness in me around the certainty that big tech presents around these things. This will change your life. What was the quote recently? 70% of drudgery will go away in the public sector. It's like, that's not just a technology problem, right? Drudgery is a feature of ways of working and mindset. So there's a whole bunch of things in that, right from the systemic stuff around how funding works, all the way through to learnt behaviours. But for me, it's about tweaking that mindset into that more experiment and adapt, the sampling and trying.
You're so right there. I couldn't agree more. So we're all going to be violently agreeing with each other here, right? Certainty, it's the illusion of certainty, because we can never be certain of any project outcome. And the difference is we have to change our mindset and approach things in a different way, because what we really need to do is understand how to manage risk. And there are some key things, we could see on the word cloud, trust is an issue, right? So how do we manage that risk? And you can do small iterative experiments that will help to build trust, that will help to deliver confidence. And it's almost like we need to pick off these problems one by one and understand what can we do to manage the risk of that project, either not meeting our ethical concerns, or how can we build trust and deliver something that is valuable to our citizens and our residents.
I think, I'm keen to jump in on something. I think one thing that's really important to know, and I mean this with all the love in the world for public sector, I did the best part of 10 years in public sector. When I went to Microsoft, I wanted a job working with public sector. But transformation in public sector is a little bit like lightning striking, because, and I don't mean that in a horrible way, but you need so many things to line up. You need strong leadership, vision. If it's local government, you need political backing, you need technical skills. And actually that's got really, really, really complicated with AI. And I mean that because there's spectrum upon spectrum upon spectrum. So you've got spectrum of where you are with technology as a whole. So there's still some organisations using Skype versus Teams. There's still some that are using file shares rather than putting files in the cloud, and these technology you've got and you've paid for. Then you've got spectrums of risk appetite. Dare I say you've got spectrums of leadership. So you end up in this position of when everything aligns, it is spectacular and you see genuine transformation and things happening, and like Strengthening Families is a fantastic program, and you see actual genuine transformation and it saves lives. Like they identify people that could really do with support and it saves lives. But that where to start, you have to caveat that with, I can answer it, but it depends on where you are on the spectrums.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's quite hard to see where you are. So if you're a chief exec or a senior leader, it's hard to look down and see where you are. That's why I think the communities are so important and working with others.
Yeah. Look, where to start is always difficult with any project, but we all know the answer, right? You start small. Think big, have that vision. Start small, iterate. All things that we do for every other project, test, learn, scale, we have all of these tools here at our fingertips. We're simply applying them to a different technology because at the end of the day, it's not about the technology, right? It's about the people and getting the people engaged and their skin in the game in those projects.
But how can we do that in a world where you need more certainty? There are fewer resources across the entire public sector, and the risk if something goes wrong is huge. How can we do it in a way which enables us to accept that things aren't going to work and be okay with that, when actually the public sector is set up to minimise risk as far as possible?
Yeah, that's a really interesting challenge, because at the senior level, exactly those things play out. And that's actually, ironically, what leads to the anti-patterns, which is the illusion of certainty, as you brilliantly put it, and then the desire to either have someone else solve the problem entirely, to move the risk external. So that's where the certainty in big tech comes into quite an unhealthy pattern, where it's like, if you just sign up to this framework, we will solve all of those things. What was the problem? Which is incredibly dangerous. And the other one is the layering on of more and more and more and more and more and more and more governance, as opposed to taking what you're describing, which what you're describing is really inspiring, but rare, surprisingly rare, because what in that world of certainty versus and lowering risk, people don't value the learning part. People start with a drive, and there's another little nuance that happens a lot in the public sector, which is carryover of expertise. So your leadership in the public sector typically is more static than you would meet in the private sector, which means that the majority of them have been in those roles for a long time and carry significant baggage, which means that often you get carryover of output, which is, I want you to do this, so I want you to use AI to solve this problem, or I want you to use this system, or I want you to do this, as opposed to starting with the problem, as Matt said, or starting with the outcome, the thing that you want to change, and then freeing up and enabling your teams. It sounds like that's happening really well for you.
It is. I've been very lucky at Islington, but the key point is it's about changing the conversation that we have with the people that we're engaging, our senior stakeholders in every project that we do. And we need to explain, as you've so eloquently put it, we cannot remove all uncertainty, right? What we're doing is going through a process we are going to take away some learning, and that learning will inform either the next phase of the project that we're doing, or it will inform another test. I think one of the key things as well, and it's quite relevant with AI, is we need to upskill within the public sector. People need to be able to understand and interpret the data, whether that's looking at the results of a test or they're looking at some predictive analytics to make a particular intervention. Without the ecosystem in place, because AI is so dependent on that ecosystem, we'll never be in the position to really unlock the full potential and give those benefits back to our residents.
Andrew, I'm wondering, we are all learning in real time, but we're learning at a pace which feels faster than almost any other technology. Now, I'm sure every time a new paradigm shifting technology comes along, people are always asking, how can we possibly be going as fast as we are? And then we speed up some more, like the expansion of the universe. How can we possibly be expecting people to upskill, especially when we're talking specifically about behaviour change and using these tools to change the behaviours of service users and our citizens for the better? Is it okay to be experimenting and learning on the job? How can we possibly manage that level of risk?
So working at Microsoft, we're like ground zero for the new technologies. So I've had Copilot for over a year. When people suddenly see it now and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm like, I had it for ages, it's great. But actually, when you see people see these new technologies and the sort of fear of what does this mean, and that pace of change is just relentless. But because the pace of change is so relentless, the gap between those that are doing it and aren't doing it is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think one of the key things for public sector is to learn from others. So at Microsoft, we established a program called Innovate Together. It's all about helping organizations to literally innovate together and work together. And we've got communities set up with hundreds of people that attend each meeting. You know, most meetings have about 400 people on. And the whole logic is that spectrum might be getting bigger, but if you can talk to the ones that are doing the new things and are trialing it, and it also, back to the previous point you made around risk, you can take away a lot of the risk from it, because if you can speak to another organisation who goes, yeah, we did that, and actually it was fine, and this is the guardrail, these are the guardrails we put in place. When you've then got 4, 5, 6, however many organisations that have been through it and done it, suddenly you've really de-risked it, because you're not trailblazing, you're not doing something new. So I think for public sector, it is a lot and it is hard to try and keep up, but certainly try and learn from others. And I'd also really, really recommend a Change Agent network. I'm a big ambassador for that. I lead the Microsoft Change Agent program and you'll hear me talk about it all the time. But the reason change agents work in the public sector is the public sector is so multifaceted. You need someone effectively in each team who can localize the benefits for the team. So when you're saying, we've got AI, like if the whole team are going, oh, what do we do with that? If you've got one person that's quite confident with tech and is quite comfortable with it, they can go, this is new, this is what it is, here's the training resources, and this is how we can use it, because that is so key for public sector.
I'll be interested, Ollie, building on that, how do we stop it being just one person's job? How do we build in teams and services a culture where we're almost using it to change the behaviours of the teams who are then using AI for behaviour change? How do we go about embedding it so it's not just one person's in particular's job and it becomes a cultural change?
So I think there's two aspects. One, to amplify the community's point. In a way, it doesn't matter what the community's thing is, but what I love about communities of practice, communities of interest, is the ability to share stories and share experience and bounce ideas around, and to come out of, for those who haven't worked in the public sector, I imagine most people on this call have, it can be very pressured, it can be very tight focused, resources are always strapped, you're always in the trenches, and it's hard to either see back to what you've already achieved, let alone think about those things. But the communities are really good at opening that window, so double down on that. The other one is about the power of storytelling. So, some of the stories you told me while we were sat over there waiting for people to check mics and things have already inspired me to go out and find out more. And I'm quite a cynical person in the grand scheme of things. I sort of feel like I've heard it all, but I'm not. I haven't heard it all, and I'm learning new things. And that was a 2-minute story in the sidelines. So the power of storytelling, not in a mythological way, that then gets to the nub of it, which is around leadership and mindset change. If you can get the stories to the leaders that you need to influence and change that approach, you can unlock capacity, because it's actually capacity and effort and time and independence of that approach that will start to unlock that, and then you get scale. Because the sad truth of it is that almost all public sector bodies are hierarchies, and you need the permission in place, and you won't get that without that groundswell in the communities.
That's it. You know, we're always working within a certain set of constraints, whether that's within the public sector or the private sector. I think one of the things that I've found super valuable, you know, if I'm starting up a test, we always want the people who are the evangelists for the technology that we're in, because it makes our life easier. But actually, you want the dissenters to test out new products, especially around AI. I love to have it, the people who say, AI, that's not for me. This is not going to help. I hate it. And I think, come on to one of my tests. I absolutely want you, because they will test the edge cases and they will push the boundaries. And actually the insight and the learning that you get from people who are motivated to try and show the shortcomings and the weaknesses, it helps to get that 360-degree view of what you're actually trying to do.
Andrew, I'm going to come on to you in a moment to ask you about adoption curves, because I know that's something you've spoken about before. But I'd just like to ask you something, Louise, about those dissenters internally. We spoke off air about how you're actually getting senior leaders within Islington Council, not just to understand it, not just to theoretically sign something off, but actually make use of it themselves in their day-to-day operations, and how that's actually helping to change the behaviours and mindsets around AI internally.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really lucky at Islington, because the leadership there, you know, they understand that they've got the perspective on the different drivers, you know, whether it's the emerging technology, the pressures that currently all public sector organisations face, and also the understanding that we need to deliver for our residents. So I think where we had really good foundations there, it was just beautiful to be able to say, you know, hey, we could test AI in this safe, controlled and measured way. And we will generate some evidence, and we'll look at it like we would look at any other business proposition. And, you know, they were open to that and have been incredibly supportive. So we've been setting up small groups across different service areas within the council, because, you know, we're as siloed as any other organisation, right? But we can work within those constraints. And our chief exec is currently testing AI and is part of that cohort of, you know, testers. And I'm very proud of her support and her encouragement and her input and feedback.
And I guess nothing gives you more permission than seeing your boss using a bit of tech.
Well, exactly. I'm lucky that people make my job very easy.
I think it's something. There was some research done by Microsoft that found that leaders adapt to generative AI more easily.
Yeah.
Because you're giving it an instruction, and the clearer the prompt, the instruction, the better the output that you get.
Yeah.
So it was saying leaders then are generally adopting it more easily. And I definitely think that leading from the top is so important.
Yeah.
Like, I see it quite polarised, so you'll have some public sector bodies where the leadership say AI is an IT problem. I think we've already said that once. Whereas others go, we need to understand this because this is such a fundamental shift for us and our organisation. I mainly work with local authorities, and you've even had members, so councillors, that have had said, you need to tell us about AI. And like we've seen cabinet meetings where we're going along and going, this is what it is, this is why it's not scary, this is why it's safe. But that leadership from the top is absolutely crucial.
It can go too far the other way though, which is you get, you know, it started with Mr. Blair and his recent summit, but it's like AI is the answer to all of the problems. What was the question? So you can also get leadership overconfidence and then solutioneering, which is as dangerous as disengagement. You said something really important early on, and I wanted to pick it out, which is around centering it on the needs of the users.
Yeah.
That's a mind. You know, you talked earlier about the different spectrum of places where the public sector is at, and for me, a precursor to doing and unlocking some of the stuff Matt talked about and some of the stuff you're doing is to really get that focus on the users first and the problems that they face, and to try and get your organisation lined up around those. Because if you don't, you're essentially getting into the, and I've seen this trap, which is central bureaucracies create a lot of paperwork, and their main desire is to make for less paperwork. And rather than, as leaders, creating less paperwork, they find clever tools to summarise and automate it. And whether that's actually effective summarisation is almost academic. You end up with a cloud somewhere full of PowerPoints no one's ever read, from meetings that no one ever cared about that had no outcomes. And that's a really dangerous so focusing on the needs of the user and what benefit you can deliver is a really nice start
Absolutely.
point.
It's always that balance, isn't it, between analysis and activity.
Yeah.
And the key is just navigating our way through and finding a path that works for the organisations that we're working with and that works for the people that we're trying to serve.
Yeah. You need to find that killer function for each person, and that's where it's hard for public sector, because it's so multifaceted. I could do a 3-hour demo on Copilot, and at the end of it someone will go, well, I don't use Outlook or Teams or Office.com, so I can't use some of those functions, and they just disregard it. And actually, I just hadn't got to the killer function that makes them realise it's really useful, because my public sector is just so complicated and they do so many different things.
You've kind of given us the answer already, right? When we build those communities of practice, it's incredible to look at the way people move from feeling, and it's the emotion they feel about a product with AI, and you shift that across to thinking about how this could be applied to their particular context or their situation. And we've found, we've set up an AI community of practice. It's like a massive chat channel, over 100 people in there, a lot of random stuff, right? But there are these little golden nuggets that are starting to appear where people are saying, oh, hey, I've got this problem. Could you give me some support and maybe we can explore this together? And that gives me, real confidence in the future that we're starting on the journey of cultural change. And I can see that happening already within a relatively short period of time, right? Because Islington Council has been around for, I should know how long, but actually I don't. A long time. As long as Islington.
We could ask Copilot.
I know, I'm so lost without it now, right? But we've only been looking at AI, seriously, maybe for the last year. So we're right at that first step of the journey. We mustn't try and run before we can walk.
So we are at the step of a journey, and that taking people on a journey is one of the key points we're talking about today, in terms of not just AI in general, but how it can be used to really power that behaviour change journey, and the sorts of things that it can do in terms of prompt engineering and personalisation of messaging. I'd be really interested to, in a moment, Ollie, to ask you about that, because I know you've got more experience in behaviour change, certainly, than I have. I just wanted to go back to something that I said I'd pick up with you in terms of the change in adoption curve, and why it's important to not just say, well, we're going to get everyone using everything right now.
Yeah, so, everyone will be familiar with the change curve, the Kubler-Ross change curve. I had a fascinating example where I was working with a public sector body in the UK. We were doing a briefing call on AI for the whole organisation, and they managed to get half the whole organisation on this call. There was it's not a huge public sector body, but like 400 people. And we were just talking it through, and I've never seen the change curve in action. It's so starkly, it was actually quite scary, because you had some people on the call going, this is amazing, like it's really useful, I'm already using bits of AI and it's going to save me loads of time, this is great. There were other people in the chat literally saying, is there anyone from HR here? I think I'm going to lose my job. I need to speak to someone. What does this mean for this team and this team and this team? So you had these complete opposite ends. The benefit of the session was we really needed them to start somewhere. Like they were asking us, where do we start? What do we do? And we just showed them all this stuff, and then they were able to start unpicking it, and we were able to deal with some of the situations. But I think I've never seen any technology come in and have such an impact on the way people are viewing what they're doing. And that fear people have to put something in place to try and deal with it and support them.
Yeah, I think that's important. There is another point around this, which is, you said it, we've only been using it a year, and you've had early access and you've been using it a couple of years. There is already it's that march of certainty again. There is sort of an assumption that what we're dealing with is a mature set of tools, and therefore if we just take the thing, this is the old transactional IT thing. It's an IT problem. We just buy the tool and then people use the tool, rather than thinking about what's the actual problem right back to the user, and then how do we do that. But there's also that experimental mindset shift, and that's a really tricky thing to get the headroom for. So in PD, 90% of the things we end up doing is around starting a beacon. It sounds like what you're experiencing, which is a small group of people with the freedom to choose and try different approaches, and to evangelise and critically evaluate that. And it's that headroom, and it's the allowance of that headroom to create the stories that feed into the communities, that start a change, that change the permissions, and then you've got the sort of systemic stuff around the outside. So, you know, that instinct to buy a thing or to sign up to a particular framework in government is amplified by the procurement models, which effectively block out small experimental startups, whether you're kind of hiring somebody to do your cleaning all the way through to like adoption of a big technology. So there's a bunch of systemic things in there that you've got to deal with. But for me, it's about getting sufficient headroom. Most change starts when you get sufficient headroom to test a few things for long enough to either evangelize or put it to bed, and then repeat and grow. And that works, right? We see it work time and time again. But both of you have pointed out, so many organizations are starting from way before the capacity to do that. And there's a real risk that some people call it the whirlwind, right? But it's just the pressure of delivering the day job swamps any ability or capacity to do that. And that ultimately gets rid of it.
We have this conversation with IT teams a lot, and they'll say, don't have time, don't have time. I say, why don't you buy some Copilot licenses or just use the Copilot in Bing and release some of your own capacity? So meeting notes, sending actions, writing emails, creating presentations. And the one recently said to me, I don't even have time to do that. And I said, but how long is it going to take you to write the notes up from this meeting? And he said, about half an hour. I said, well, I could do it with Copilot in about 30 seconds. I said, so that would give you half an hour back. How many meetings do you have? And there's a domino effect of, I've saved time, I can reinvest it in training, I can do more. But it's a culture thing, it's a growth mindset.
It's a culture thing, and it's part of the human condition, right? We all like doing things that we're very comfortable doing. And those low value, high volume tasks that we do every day, it's comforting, right? I do it myself. I know if I just want to switch off for half an hour, I'll get on with a bit of admin. And it's relaxing because there's no pressure. We don't like operating on the edge of our personal comfort zone. But that's what we need to do. And we need a few people to step forward and say, I will test that, I will share the results openly with the community. And if I've learned that that is rubbish and it doesn't work, sorry to use technical terms, but they need to be able to say that publicly for the common good, because we don't have any competitive advantage across all of the London local authorities or, you know, broader within the UK. We're public sector, we can share everything with each other. And if we can become comfortable sharing our failures, and because they're not failures actually, bad, it's learning, it's experience.
It feels like very much like the real challenge at the moment feels like internal behaviour change and how we change internal behaviours. How about external behaviours? Some of the examples that were shared earlier were how organisations are shaping behaviours of service users, but there are risks around that. I recall an instance where we were testing ChatGPT. Simply put a prompt in saying, write us an introduction, you're the new CEO of a company, write a speech. And it wrote out a wonderful speech. Simply put the name, the word, you are the new female CEO of a company, and the speech itself was fundamentally different. Now, when you've got simple examples like that, how can we be sure that AI isn't going to negatively impact on a particular group in society? How can we be sure and have certainty that it's going to be good rather than bad?
You can't, is the straight answer. I'm sure there are mitigating and clever technical ways you can improve it. But I think the first thing is to accept we're in the infancy phase of this, right? So that's where that mindset of test and adapt and critically evaluate comes in. And it always worries me when people say, oh, you know, I can, with absolute certainty, I can summarize these things. That's fine if the thing that you risk losing is the minutiae of someone's opinion of a program. It's not so fine if it's a medical transcription. And those sorts of things are emerging and challenging. So you don't want to end up in a doom situation where you give up because of that risk, nor do we do want to end up in an optimism death march, which is like, oh, this is going to be brilliant if we just persevere, and leave behind you a huge pile of mess in your wake, right? That's just as dangerous. Is what I mean about the absolute certainty and confidence with which some people speak about the future is, to me, it's just a mark of insanity. It's like, no, you have to accept where we are on this. It's like the internet. People predicted the internet would be all sorts of things. AI may or may not live to be as big a change as the beginning of the internet, but we certainly didn't predict where we are today in terms of the internet's hugely positive in the way it delivers services to people, the way it can connect remote people. However, there's a whole bunch of normal societal problems that are amplified by the internet, and AI and machine learning and all of the things that follow those are going to do the same. And it's that uncertainty and that you have to keep in mind and be able to critically evaluate. For me, anyway.
I think it's really, if people haven't read Microsoft's AI principles, it's really useful to read them. And if you just search on Bing, as you're searching for Microsoft's AI principles, it's really useful to have a look through those, because we genuinely work to them. And it just means that there's a transparent, this is how we're using AI, this is how we've trained it, this is where we're going with it. But I could talk for about 3 hours on that, so I'm not going to.
But also, it's important for us to have the conversation with the people whose lives we're potentially affecting. You know, we're doing tests at the moment in Islington, and we're engaging our residents. They are part of the groups who are testing the products that we are building for them to make their lives easier.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't do that user engagement as a superficial thing or to give some sort of justification to your preconceived ideas. It has to be a genuine conversation to understand what do they want us to do, and are we using the information in an ethical way, and are we delivering something ultimately that's of value to them, and that can help us to nudge behaviour in a way that makes good financial sense for us at Islington. You know, what big conversation for local authorities is around channel shift.
That's it, yeah.
You know, we want people to interact with us digitally, because that allows us to be incredibly cost effective and to use their council tax money very wisely. Yeah. So we are talking to our residents and, you know, throw things out there. Do you like WhatsApp? I mean, I shouldn't mention products, but I kind of will. And it's, you know, widely adopted. Our residents are saying, yeah, we'd love to use that to book a housing repair. And no, actually, I don't mind if it's an AI agent who's booking that repair for me. And you can educate people, and you know, that's our residents that we're looking to have that conversation with. And their feedback is a valuable contribution and is shaping the way that we're developing and testing AI.
That's superb. Sorry but that, again, the goal to that, and I hadn't really seen it through that lens, but the goal to that is, again, going right back to the needs of the customer, exactly. or in your case, the user of those services. There is a real inherent danger of the pressure that the public service is under, which is efficiency often is correlated with saving people. So you talked about saving a day a week. That's good in the private sector. There are people who will be fearful of that, and there are also leaders who are just looking to do that. If I create a chatbot, I can replace X number of people manning a help desk. And it's like, well, you're missing all of the challenges. I mean, I used a certain parcel company's chatbot the other day, and quite frankly, I'm now avoiding that parcel company forever. It was an AI chatbot, but it was clearly trained by the old system. And that pattern of not focusing on the needs of the user and driving behaviours, you know, the 70% drudgery headline really stuck in my head, because drudgery isn't created by anything other than the way you run your business, right? Yeah. But if you start at the other end and you start with who benefits, and you can work up, that's really inspiring. I really like that.
Just the point there on training is actually one of the questions from our audience. So if there are additional questions you'd like to submit, please do now. We've got a few minutes left and I'll try and fit some in. But Joe from Tottenham was asking, how can we be sure that we can train our AI tools when the data how can we be sure to train our AI tools to better meet local needs when the data required is locked away in legacy systems? I feel that's a common issue across almost every public sector organisation I've ever experienced.
Can I take that one?
Yeah.
So data modernisation is a huge piece of work, but actually it's not that hard, to be frank. You can use AI tools now to map your data. You can have the catalogues. Yeah, genuinely, like I was working with a local authority, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to hire 4 people to map all our data and work out what we've got." And I went, "You don't need to do that. Like, just turn this on, and that'll do that for you." It's called Purview. And now that's what they've done. And now they can see everything. They've got the catalogue in. They can associate the information asset owners and everything else with it. So you can get your data out of the legacy systems and make it usable. And there's also AI tools that you can use around, so say it's hard copy scanned documents, it can recognise them all and then use AI search functionality and tag them. So there's loads of things you can do, but and I'm been trying to avoid AI is the answer, but actually for those ones, AI is part of the answer.
Yeah, I'd never have thought of it. It's really useful.
Yeah, I like the circularity of it. You know, how can I make sure that my AI works more appropriately? Well, use AI to solve that problem for you. It is a challenge though, and it's incumbent on us as technology professionals really to explain internally AI is part of an ecosystem. This is not something that you can just bolt on to the way that you currently work. You'll never get the maximum benefit from it. You need that underlying data. And the data that we have locked away in our line of business systems, it's a common problem across probably every organisation. And we need to have a different conversation with our suppliers, right? We're not paying you to lock our data away from us. Yeah. That is our data. We need to use it. And you need to make it available in a beautiful format that makes it a slick and cohesive process for us to overlay a tool like AI to benefit everyone. Because at the end of the day, every single person is a resident of a local authority. We're doing this to ourselves, and we need to make it easier for us all to benefit.
That's a brilliant, brilliant point. And there is something, there's a little bit of almost kind of insurgent nature in me that I hear that, and there is something that we aren't using, which is the collective power of. So if you create communities who are all locked into individual vendor products and things, who actually say, do you know what, the thing that we all want is accessible data. We want our data out of these locked frameworks. Because if you look at the NHS, for example, the NHS patient record thing has been going on for decades, but it's anti-competitive for the people who have built the products to make that data shareable and available to other ecosystems. If we got everybody together across the piece to say, well, actually, do you know what? Use the power of the combined marketplace to leverage that changes that dynamic, and is a real opportunity I hadn't seen before.
And I'm guessing not just to make it easily accessible, but cheaply accessible or free. Exactly. As you say, it's your data. And that comes on to our final question, which is from Debbie from Maidstone, who's asked, how can we make sure that the costs for these sorts of projects don't spiral as they sound expensive?
Yes.
So I'll go back, test, learn, scale, right? Create a small test. We cannot predict where we want to be in 2 years' time. If any of us could predict the future, we would focus that on next Saturday's lottery numbers, right? And practice our powers of prediction that way. Create a small test. Understand the outcome that you want to achieve from that test and take the learning into the next phase. Do not spin up mega projects that create a Wikipedia, documentation pile that you need something like Copilot to read and understand for you. Start small, but absolutely think big and understand where you want to get to, but break up that journey. And then you don't have, that sort of sunk cost regret where you're looking in 18 months' time thinking, hey, we've done this all wrong. And it allows you to intervene earlier as well, because you just nudge something 1 degree, right? You're going to affect the direction. And by nudging ourselves and using all of those behavioural insights, we're able to test and scale in a much more controlled way that helps us to manage risks. And that will help to manage the risk of cost escalation as well.
Sorry, just one more thing. I don't have any other.
Perfect, because we're almost out of time.
I was going to say really quickly, if I imagine quite a few people on the call are Microsoft customers. If you go to copilot.bing.com, you have already got a Copilot that you can use. Start getting the benefit from that. Start understanding where you can save time and resources. And then, as you said, you can do a trial. So say you buy 100 Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses, give them to people where you know you're going to get benefit. So there was, as part of the Copilot community, they looked at personal assistants and they found that within 2 weeks they were saving an hour a day per personal assistant. So that's obviously a gain. there's ways that you can genuinely save time, effort, money. But yeah, start where you feel comfortable, and there's loads of assistance out there. But the communities are key, because the communities are saying, we did save time there, that worked, that was great, and they can really guide people through where they need to get to.
So start with the communities. And if the answer isn't in there, then I will say that you can always give Supercharge a shout, and we'll certainly do a workshop with you and explore some of those options and just see if there might be an opportunity for you to go away and do something interesting with AI. All that remains to do is to remind you that the white paper will be shared with you at the end of this week, and it will be available via the Supercharge website. You can download it, share it for free, and get that information out there. I'd like to thank my panel for being along. Thanks, Louise, Ollie, and Andrew for being part of this and sharing such interesting thoughts. And no doubt there's going to be a lot of follow-up and a lot more content to get out there to get people thinking in the space. And thank you for dialing in, and hopefully we'll be able to speak to some of you very, very soon indeed. Have a great week.